Yesterday, I was in this very same place, and I said to the audience, we did a great panel on the future of impact valuation and impact accounting. And I said to everyone that it was going to be the best session in the whole summit, and that from that moment on, the disappointment is that everything else would go downhill and it will be worse. I lied because this one is very good as well. So you're lucky enough to be here in this amazing session. And you know, I will tell you full disclosure, and I will tell you something that I liked. In many of these events, I'm sure you attend these events, you participate in these events, more and more, at least I am seeing, that people say, well, can you send me the questions? And people will want to know exactly what they will be saying, and they bring scripts. And then I think, as an spectator, I think, well, I'm not interested in like listening to you saying something that you wrote, or that's all pre-guided. So to these lovely people, I said, there will be no questions, no nothing.
We'll go with flow.
We'll go with the flow. And I don't really want to talk to you a lot before, because what I read about them, I'm genuinely interested in getting to know all of you. It's the first time we are together. And the four of them said, yes, that's what we want. So amazing start. So great to see you in person, finally. The few notes I will use is to not get the names and the titles wrong. I will first mention this distinguished group of friends. Roland Pearson, there, Vice President and Executive Director of the Terwilliger Center for Innovation in Shelter from Habitat for Humanity International. Angeli Van Saal, founding partner of Havana Capital. Iker Marcaide, founder and chair of the SUBI Group. Thank you for being with us, Iker. And Jaime Gomez Leria from Primero H. Jaime, I would have said Jaime Gomez Xera. Yeah, but because we ruined the Spanish language. That Cervantes cultivated so pristinely and with so much care, and then the Argentinians, we took it and we destroyed it.
You pivoted. In Strata language, you pivoted language, right?
Exactly, yeah. It come and go. So anyway, why are we here together? I think we're here together to talk about something at least very, very dear, very important to many of us here. I've been in and out of the habitat space, including in politics in my country, and then working in other places. I'm an economist, and I never thought about cities when I was younger. I was not taught to think about cities as a driver of development. I've always been in development, but in uni, in master, in everything, there wasn't a connection. And still, in our community of impact, I think we don't pay enough attention to the issue of cities, housing, and habitat as a driver of impact. But it became more apparent in the last few years, at least to me and to probably to all the colleagues, that if you want to achieve a just transition to net zero, if you want to deliver the GSGs, or if you want to build an impact economies, well, you can't overlook housing, habitat, as a key area for development. And it's an area where we are super under invested. And it's one of those areas where clearly government activity alone can't cope. So I will tell you two, three data points, just for everyone to size the challenge. Data very familiar to all of you. So the construction and operation of buildings is responsible for a bit more than 40% of the carbon emissions every year. And something that we discussed with Roland last week is, and I will talk about that with the panelists, more or less, yeah, there are improvements, but roughly we keep constructing like we did maybe 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and we accept that gladly and passively. 25% of the most populated cities in the world will be 5 degrees hotter by 2050, when our collective goal was not to exceed 1.5. And this doesn't mean like poor cities or poor cities, rich cities, the most populated cities in the world. Many cities are now appointing chief heat officers. Paris is getting ready to be a 50-degree city. 1 billion people, a bit more than 1 billion people, live in slums around the world with no formal access to water, electricity, sanitation, with no land titles. There's an investment gap in that field, according to a research we did at the GSG, of more than $6 trillion in that field alone. Last year, the US economy had productivity losses for a bit more than $100 billion due to extreme weather events last year alone. And last year alone, in Europe, 62,000 people died for heat-related death. And it was the hottest summer in record. And Italy was the worst hit country, and Spain, where we are now, was the second worst hit country. So something is clearly going on, and something is clearly failing. So today, I would like all of you to take three things back home, or where you go. Maybe you already know them, but I would like us to reflect on three things. And then we'll see at the end if we did or not. One is to raise awareness about housing and habitat as a key area for impact. So just understand why we should care about this. The second one is to start discussing how we mobilize more private capital to address this agenda. And above all, learn from the friends here about real solutions. What's going on and how are you working to channel more capital to this agenda from very different entry points, which I like. Roland, I would like to start with you. You were telling me yesterday, I was trying to save some of that for today. Well, you foster innovation in shelter through things like shelter tech initiatives, and you invest quite a bit of money in this. Why should we care about that, from Habitat for Humanity standpoint, and how are you driving capital solutions for it?
Thanks, Sebastian, and good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thanks to GSG for arranging this. I think Sebastian has given us, quite a good platform of statistics and perspectives. Just to sort of add to that, I've said this in different ways, but really housing or habitat is inextricably related to environment and climate. And we talk about a just transition. And from our perspective, what more just place to start than the home? And when you look at investments in habitat, not just a house, but the habitat, which is the combination of the built environment, the human environment, and the natural environment, really the climate impacts are tremendous. And what we do at the Terwilliger Center is invest literally and figuratively in companies and solutions in market systems that can deliver solutions. So we invest in 3D printing companies, we invest in companies doing manufactured sand, we invest in potable water solutions, et cetera. And just to give you an example, I was in Mexico about 3 weeks ago, and one of our partners there has developed a new concrete that in its manufacture generates a quarter of the greenhouse gas emissions that regular concrete does. It uses less water, it's easier to apply, it's less expensive. And so those kinds of solutions are the kinds of things that we're looking to bring to market. And one other element in the Mexican context, which is important there as well as many other places, is that it's equally resilient to earthquake damage. So it's critical that we continue to develop those kinds of solutions. As Sebastian said, I thought he had the quote of the session when we met last week. He said, we're not flying pigeons around to communicate with each other. Why are we still building houses the way we did 200 years ago? And so it really is a transformation of markets. It's not just coming up with new and nifty technologies. There are lots of new and nifty technologies. It's a question of whether our consumers going to want to buy them. Are the masons and the contractors and what have you who make up the construction value chain willing to use those new technologies? As I said, particularly from a low-income household perspective, they have to be less expensive or no more expensive than solutions they currently have. So there's a lot to doing that, and that's a lot of what we focus on is developing those market systems. So when we say invest, yes, we do have a venture philanthropy fund that actually invests in individual companies. We also have a global accelerator that supports a lot of those companies, but we also partner with a lot of market stakeholders to try and bring these solutions to market and scale them.
And Roland, what I get from what we both shared is a sense of urgency, right? I mean, 2030 is tomorrow, and the 2030 agenda looks more like the 2100 agenda, given the pace we are having. And you say something like this, alternative cement, you say it, and to all of us sounds very intuitive, cheaper, less contaminant, that's what we want. But no, I mean, the cement we use is the same cement we've been using for hundreds of years. And I'm worried. I mean, I'm worried because it's happening now, or it's already happening. What makes you think that there will be a breakthrough? I mean, when does the iPhone of construction materials come from the pigeon?
Look, I mean, I actually think, really to the theme of this particular session, there are 2.8 billion people currently who are inadequately or unhoused. If you try to house those people in the same way we've housed all of us in this room and others, you'll literally kill the planet. We're already 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. You can do the math fairly simply and figure out that we can't continue to build that way. I think, the fact that climate impacts are, you're going to feel that 5 degrees. We're all feeling that 5 degrees, and if you're a low-income person living under a tin roof, you're going to feel it to a factor of 10 even further. So I think that there are some natural forces, literally and figuratively, that are spurring action and that are causing people to wake up. It's not a theoretical, they said something at the UN climate conference about 1.5 degrees, but that people are seeing it and feeling it every day. Just this morning on my phone, I got breaking news. It actually shouldn't be breaking news. It's kind of daily news about a breakout in dengue fever. Well, that's a product of lots of things, but when you look at urbanized, overcrowded, informal settlements, that's the kind of thing that's going to spread. And so, if you're trying to address a climate challenge, if you're trying to address a health challenge, if you're trying to address an economic development challenge in terms of employment and enterprise creation, really construction broadly, housing in particular, is an excellent place to put an investment. And I think that there is a confluence of knowledge and experience that's coming together that's getting us to a tipping point. We're not there yet, but I can see it happening in the markets that we're working in.
Let's come back to the tipping point in a bit. Anjali, when I was reading about Havana, I was fascinated. In particular, when I read about the Havana Climate and Sustainability Fund. Your business partner is here, right? Hello, great to see you. And from what I read, is India's first and largest climate tech VC. You work on mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and many of the things I read that you're doing have to do with greener, cleaner mobility, supply chains, food systems. How do you relate, or what do you reflect on the implications for housing and habitat?
So just picking up from where Roland actually left off, see, cities are vital units for economic development. And urbanization is actually a positive force for the most part to lead countries, and certainly in the global south, India is a large representative, to the path to economic progress. Now, if I take India by itself, 1.4 billion people, multiple climatic zones, every type of habitat that you can imagine, and many, many cultures and ways of life, from deep forest bays, indigenous people, to absolutely modern urban habitats like Mumbai and Delhi and so on, right? So we have the full spectrum. Now, to solve for a country like this, which is actually not a country, it's a subcontinent like this, with its diversity and its complexity, and continue to grow, 6 to 9% GDP growth, pick a number over the next 25 years. And I mentioned this in yesterday's discussion, 75% of the infrastructure or the built environment that is planned for India in 2047, so 25 years from now, the amount of built environment that is in plan, India will turn 100 as an independent country in 2047, 75% has not yet been built. That is the
So it's not what?
75% of the built environment has not yet been built.
Okay.
So that is the scale of new build that is already in plan. We may build more, but that is what needs to happen in a way that is far more sustainable than pigeons flying to take messages, right? So I love that metaphor. I will use that with full attribution.
And when you say plan, it's like government plans? Or
That's
like,
the government plan, that's the national plan.
And do they say how they plan to build, or say we will build?
We will build, and those pathways are the pathways that we all have to collectively figure out. And when I say collectively, it means collectively everything. It's urban planning, the way cities have been envisioned and built, sometimes with very inadequate planning. We cannot continue like that. You cannot wish cities away. Cities are important, they are vital. In fact, densely populated clusters tend to be more energy efficient. So it's not about reducing density. We have to increase density, but we have to do it differently. And we have to work across the entire value chain, and I'll come back to what we do at Havana. But the value chain includes new materials, which may not exist today, but we need to invent them and rapidly. New financing mechanisms, because this will require a transition. So there is mitigation involved with new materials. There is transition involved with financing new materials, new technologies, and the journey. I mean, yes, of course, we know there is green concrete. We've looked at a couple of companies in the recent past which are injecting, say, CO2, for example, directly into the concrete making process, thereby bringing down cement by about 20-25%, and hence the carbon footprint. Why is it not adopted at scale? Because of cost. So somehow this has to get financed. So there is new science, new invention on building materials, there's financing, perhaps there is housing design. We shouldn't be building these concrete boxes. I don't know, right? Yep. But those are the things we have to look at. And then as you look in the northern hemisphere, you think about cooling. In the tropical areas, you have to think about, as heating, in the tropical areas, you have to think about cooling. Wet pulp temperatures touching 50 degrees Celsius means people need cooling. You can't tell them, no, you're a poor country, sorry, you won't have air conditioning. So we have to think about new ways of cooling, new ways of heating. And frankly, cities as integrated systems and supply chains of water, waste, food. How does food come into a city? It is not grown there, so it travels many, many miles and kilometers to come there. That itself is not sustainable, and it is expensive.
And what is, for example, like a venture, an innovation that you backed in the last years that you say, well, this is a clever idea? What gives you hope? You know, from the fund, which is an example of something that you invested in that you think, well, this could be a breakthrough technology?
There are multiple technologies. So built environment is a key focus area for us. We look at everything from digital water metering to improve water efficiencies for large housing complexes. So there's water, of course. There is waste treatment. We are looking at a company right now that is using local resident microbial cultures in effluent water treatment. It started as an effluent water treatment company, but they have found that they can convert that into acetates and, in fact, into biohydrogen, which we were talking about earlier. I mentioned the CO2 injection into concrete making, so it reduces the quantity of cement. We are seeing a variety of building materials.
CO2 injection into concrete.
And this is not a new technology, by the way. This is about a 15-year-old technology. The question is, how do you make that process so much more efficient that it becomes cost-effective? Okay. Because cement is a razor-thin margin business, concrete even more so. So building materials, we are looking at, we've just been talking to a bunch of companies, actually, that are using digital tools for more efficient power usage at the home level for heating, cooling, appliances. I mean, there's a huge range of things that needs to be done. And, of course, we don't invest in urban planning, but I also serve on the board of GIFT City, which is India's newest, highly technology-enabled city, which has district cooling, integrated waste management. Now, we recognize this cannot be put in brownfield into existing urban clusters. But certainly, as new cities and new developments are planned, I think some of these are planning techniques that need to be taken into account.
Good. Thank you. Jaime, I will look at you, and from what I read, first time we see each other, I would say, looking at your CV, well, this guy is a real estate developer, and probably you do other things. But it looked like the profile of a real estate developer, and you're innovating as well. But in the times you've had in the industry, do you see a change? I mean, are developers trying to think differently and raising capital differently, or you think it's business as usual?
Well, yeah, I think there are things changing, but not as fast as we would like to. And yes, I've been a real estate developer, but nowadays I'm not working as a real estate developer. Yeah. I've been working in the construction company, I've been working in real estate development companies, and also as a consultant for real estate investors. But I'm here today, and I'm glad to be here. And first of all, thank you for the opportunity to share our project with the audience. We're here because we're worried about what is the use we do, how are we using real estate assets. And I work for Primero H, which is a joint venture between a non-profit organization called Hogarsi. Hogarsi exists so that nobody lives in the streets. They've been working for more than 25 years towards the eradication of homelessness. And the other part of the joint venture is ASOCIMI, which is a National Association of Spanish REITs. I don't know if the audience know what REITs are. REITs are investment vehicles that invest in real estate assets, income-producing real estate assets. So the joint venture is very simple. Hogarsi needs houses for the projects. They rely on the housing first methodology. Basically, housing first, what means is you prioritize for homeless people to provide them a home, and that is the platform from where they can build a new life. Yep. And take them out of the streets. So that is social impact. And we, as real estate owners, what we want is help them to achieve their goals. So basically, what we're doing is this. I mean, we're investing in houses that they use to get people off the streets.
And what's the business model? Because I guess many investors invest in the rate, and how does it work? How do you structure the business?
Yeah, basically, in Spain, SOCIMIs have to be listed. The REITs, the main purpose of REITs is that every kind of investor, big investors or even personal investors, individuals, can invert in large-scale real estate projects that are income producers. Okay. I can't invest, for example, in an office building. I can't afford it. But I can have a stake, in a real estate portfolio that holds business offices.
And that gets offered to you by your bank, by whom?
Yeah, you buy shares on the market.
You buy shares, okay.
Yeah, we're listed. So basically, this is, so that everyone can access to this investment. Okay. The joint venture is between the Spanish REIT Association. So basically, nowadays, our main investors are other REITs, Spanish REITs. That want to collaborate with this social impact. Because we're providing the investors, on one side, a secure investment. You invest in real estate assets that are income producing, but you provide them with the capability to invest in social impact.
But how do they get repaid? I mean, I guess...
Well, basically, our business model, the NGOs and the non-profit organizations which are our tenants, they get income from basically public resources. They work for Spanish regions and town halls that they have contracts to eradicate homelessness. They try to, the housing first approach tries to eradicate, and it's another approach different from the shelter approach. And so they have public contracts, and for us, it's a solvent tenant that they pay their rent, and we have no vacancy on the real estate asset. So basically, the investors get the returns from the rents, all the money we receive from the.
So these non-profits are service providers to different government entities.
Sorry?
These non-profits are service providers to government, and they help them deal with the issue of homelessness.
Well, we rent them the spaces, we rent them the houses, and they pay the rent. And we're able to provide them with a rent that is on the low range of the market price.
Okay.
And we also provide them all the, I mean, we take care of the real estate.
And
Today,
and
for
your
example,
investors?
Hogarsi manages around 400 houses for their housing first projects. But they have to manage with, they have to deal with 400 landlords.
Yeah.
And you know, they have programs that last like between 3 and 6 years with the public administrations. But they can't match always, you know, the contracts they have with all those different landlords. So we can provide them, you know, volume of assets, and we create affordable rental contracts that fits their necessity.
And the investor that goes to you, they know that their capital will go to this solution. It's not that they invest in a wider pool and they have no idea.
Exactly. Well, what we have is on one side.
What I'm saying, like, the market recognizes this investment as a social investment.
Exactly. And how do we do that? We have an ethics committee that grants, that assures the social mission of the REIT. So basically, when you invest in Primero H, on one side you have the security that you're going to invest in assets that are income producing, and also on the other side, you know that they're going to be rented to these NGOs and non-profit organizations that create social impact. The social impact is measurable, and we provide measures of the social work that it's producing. And on the other side, this ethical committee, because when you're listed, you could also have a problem that it's okay, you lose control of the property. I mean, any investor can get into the SOTIMI. So basically what we have is a corporate structure in which we have the listed company, and below we have the PropCo company that holds the assets. And in the PropCo company, there's this ethical committee that's part of the incorporation. It's something that's always going to be there.
Like to ensure a mission lock-in. So
exactly.
You don't, okay. I have 2 million questions, but I also want to know from Iker, some people call themselves serial entrepreneurs. You're really, from what I've read, a serial impact entrepreneur. Now with Subibat, you've done so many things. And you've done things, from what I read, innovating wood tech construction, decarbonization of buildings, circular economy in construction, urban development with that barrio in Valencia, La Pineda, is it right? Well, you've been in this business. I mean, I would like to know about everything, but pick something to illustrate what we are talking about.
Yeah, I think another word of, you know, it's people that tend to complicate their life too much and don't stay still. That's kind of another way of defining. But I think if we're talking about impact, I think it's really hard when you're seeing issues firsthand, just kind of saying, oh, you know, someone will take care of it, right? And that's kind of where we feel. So at Zubi, we feel entrepreneurs. I mean, we even create companies with other co-founders. So essentially, we create companies, and that's, you know, things that look like startups, things that don't look like startups, and then we also invest with our different kind of funds, and we anchor these projects financially, and then typically we would have, you know, talent and co-investors kind of multiplier. So we see ourselves as a platform, as an enabler that people can use in different ways to kind of multiply, and we take a kind of a catalytic role in some sense there. So that's kind of conceptually. And, you know, taking more a Western perspective, you know, I ended up in this world kind of by chance. You know, I think I, you know, suffer first-hand things and try to solve them. And, you know, we created a school in Valencia, and when we were kind of growing the school and we're looking for a site, I said, where should we actually create the new site for the school for as children grow up? And then I started talking with the families. Where should we kind of locate the school? And it's interesting because all said the same. If I could choose, just put it like, you know, on my street. And they said, well, it's interesting because people don't put, you know, it's like people typically don't have the schools on their street, right? And so at the end, so I started like looking at how cities are designed and like, where do you work? Where do you have fun? Where do you have your school? Where do you live? And in fact, all those things don't tend to be collocated. And some of the issues, if you think about, you know, the urban agenda and pollution, inequality, infrastructure, cutting, you know, and creating inequality, actually are derived from that. It's like how cities are designed. So then we said, okay, let's do kind of an interesting project, which is we take the school and we create a district around it. So we bought these 30 hectares of land around. That was originally military land, so it's kind of a brownfield project. And say, let's start this project from scratch, but in a very different way. Like if we were a startup, what would we do? We would actually talk first with the user and try to do some sort of discovery. So why don't we actually co-create this project with the end users? So we put this landing page and say, these are, we want to see more green, less brown. We want to own less and, enjoy more, and all these bunch of things. And, back and see our children grow up playing in the streets like maybe we did. So who wants to join, right? And we started this co-creation process, and in that process, we actually realized that, there are elements that are like, you talk about like making polyvalent spaces, what is the shared space, what is private space, what is, all those things, which is really interesting because it opened our eyes. And then we said, and we're going to start with very ambitious social environmental projects. And this is the Barrio La Pinada project, the Pine Tree District. So we said, okay, let's think about carbon, let's think about biodiversity, let's think about circular economy business models, let's think about just diversity, inclusion, like how do we create social cohesion, how can we actually, if there's a metric for measuring happiness, how can we think of creating a district in which people are actually happy, and Bhutan has a reference on how they measure like their GDP happiness. And we started that process. Of course, developing a district that doesn't follow kind of the, startup speed.
Yep.
And we've been kind of following that and open ours, and we have several projects now. But it also opened our eyes is that there are unsolved things. So with our venture builder, we started developing projects like spin-offs on gaps that we were seeing. So for example, we were building the school and we were realizing that the waste ends up in landfills, which is crazy, right? You think about, we're trying to make a circular economy. So we created this company called Circular, which is avoiding that and helps kind of give a second life to materials and reinsert them. And this year, I think it was over 1 million tons of materials that has kind of reinserted, and currently is the leading player in Spain in this space. Then we started thinking, what are the materials we're going to use? Well, we would love to have carbon embedded. Can we use wood, right? Can we even think on how can we contribute the whole kind of wood and forestry value chain? So we created Woodea, which is a company that builds buildings out of wood, of industrialized wood.
All of these things are commercial.
Sorry? Yeah, they're in the market.
All these things are commercial.
They're in the market. I mean, and they started, maybe we're the first client, but they're doing now several projects for many others.
So like Woodea started building for you, and now it grew.
Yeah, it's doing a bunch of projects for other people, right? And we've kind of been not only funding initially, but also being, say, kind of venture clienting model in that sense. And for example, also in terms of like measuring venture we're putting together now, it's like on the operation stage, how can you actually measure and improve energy efficiency? How can you retrofit existing, because we realize that, well, the challenge is not just kind of new stock, but what happens with existing stock. And how could you actually potentially retrofit it, especially for people with lower income, which are actually the ones that are paying more energy cost. So from there, we've kind of started creating all these different things. And when we started about a district, we said, well, district is one sort of challenges that we want to solve, but there are other scales. We can think about buildings, we can think about all these different elements, and in that intersection of like cities, this is Subi Cities. This is kind of our business unit: cities, innovation, and sustainability.
I see a thread here. All of these guys care about an issue, or they care about the same issue, and they chose a subset of a problem, and all of them developed a solution, clever solutions, programmatically, and you design financial vehicles to back that. Roland with the venture philanthropy model for shelter tech, Anjali with the VC investing in technology in India, you, Jaime, talking about homelessness and affordable rental, through a very clever model of these real estate investment funds that connect with the markets. Well, and you with this mega structure of connected ventures that are growing. I would love to know way more about that. And when I hear people like this, I say, well, there's a chance, no? We may reach the tipping point. But then this week, I also read, for example, that the Prime Minister of the UK issued an act that essentially is treating drivers as victims. And they say, well, no, we're going to put more cars on the street. I mean, we have the right to ride our cars, and we'll create more parking spaces because drivers, we've always been a nation of drivers, so, well, let's continue driving, less fines and more parking spaces. And I say, well, but the world is screwed because, you know, if this guy is a leader of the G7 country and he's saying we should have more cars in the street, then I feel for people like you. Because, you know, you're there with your bucket, you know, taking water out of the ocean, and then the wave comes in. Are we lost? I mean, are we winning? Or the bad guys are winning?
We are the bad guys. We are the bad guys.
You are
So
the
of
bad
course,
guys?
yeah, all of us are the bad guys.
No, yeah, because we
this
have
is the
it.
system we've created.
Yeah.
And so we are the bad guys, but we're also the good guys.
No, you're the good guys trying to fix the system we created, and the system in which and the status quo in which we grew up.
Yeah.
This is a controversial
Look, I mean,
question. Roland, I'll go first.
Yeah, I take your point. And
I mean, I'm sorry, but you know, folks like us sitting here in these rooms, we can't say it is their problem that they created, right?
Yeah.
We as a system have created the problem,
Yeah.
and hence we as a system have to solve it.
Yeah.
So it's really incumbent on us.
yeah, I mean, I think if you think about property markets in most economies, particularly in the U.S., where I'm based, but even in Europe and other places, you know, property, a house is typically seen as the primary sort of largest asset that a family, most families are going to have. And sociologically, financially, economically, we have built a culture that I want to keep increasing the value of that property, which forces us to do things that actually keep the people that we're supposedly trying to bring into the housing market out. You know, they're trying to catch up to an ever accelerating bus, which, like you say, we're driving largely. And so there is a need for substantial structural change, not just, you know, sort of a little investment here and there on the sides. I do think, look, as Habitat for Humanity, it's a 46-year-old organization. We've housed 46 million people in that period. And it is only now really living into the fact that it needs to use its voice to influence others to do, you know, what we've been doing. Not necessarily the way we've been doing it, but certainly with the mindset and the values that we've been doing it. And so we've actually, as an organization, in the last several months, and we're still sort of bedding this down as a true global strategy, are transitioning to something we call build and influence. And so essentially it's to say, look, we're going to keep building houses, bringing communities and volunteers together to build houses, and that's a great way to build houses, but it's not the cheapest, it's not the fastest, it's not even the most efficient way of doing it. But there are important reasons to stick to that model of building, but it is to take that experience of building and to influence others to take up, not necessarily, like I said, our model, but certainly our cause. And so you will be seeing Habitat for Humanity being much more vocal, both in the US, where we're in all 50 states, as well as globally, where we're in 70 countries, you know, really advocating for structural change in market systems. We, as the Terwilliger Center, are really amping up our market systems approach. I mean, in Peru, for example, my team there has been really good at putting together really a multi-stakeholder coalition that has major developers, cement companies, the government, et cetera. And you know, just a few months ago, I saw actually several new developments where these developers are, you know, buying large tracts of either green or brownfield properties, building 1,000-unit developments, of which about 20% are set aside for low-income households. And again, you know, they're seeing market value in that. They're seeing that it has, you know, social benefit. They're seeing that it's financially beneficial. So again, bringing those market actors together and influencing them to act collectively, I think is the way we've chosen to try and, you know, deal with these structural issues. So yes, we are to some extent part of the bad guys because we were all interested in our property values going up, I'm pretty sure. But we also
you chose
are looking
that
to...
way of advocacy to
Yeah,
create that.
it's
that was
advocacy
an
and
example.
it's market systems change.
We are entering the last bit of the session, and while I ask you very, very briefly to say what do you think? Like Roland said, well, I mean, I'm fighting the fight through advocacy and example and structural change. What makes each of you hopeful that we'll change the system for good? But while they respond that, if anyone has a question, raise a hand. Maybe we can take one or two. You want to go, Iker? What makes you hopeful?
Yeah, so, I think like life is not a straight line, creating a company is not a straight line, solving some of the challenges we live is not a straight line. I think it's more like a zigzagging. So, there are presidents of important nations in the world that surprise us with their statements. I think we're all kind of thinking, but I'm a firm believer that the externalities, the positive and the negative, are more and more and every day kind of embedded in the mechanisms of the markets, whether it's the financing, whether it's customers taking decisions, whether it's pricing, etc. And I think that's
What
kind
does
of
it
our
mean? Like investors are more aware, or consumers are more aware?
Just to put you an example, so right now we're doing a joint venture with a big real estate group that they're saying, my portfolio of assets, it's not investable, but it's not institutional grade because it's not energy efficient. How can you guys help us with technology? Let's figure out something together.
And that wouldn't have happened like 20 years ago?
That would not have happened 2 years ago.
2 years ago, okay.
So it's like, okay, so it's like, that's interesting. So, you might have internationality, you might not have internationality, but you gotta get your act together. We can do something together.
Good.
So,
That's
kind of my...
Market discipline. So
Yeah.
we have advocacy, market discipline. Jaime?
Well, I would say that I'm really hopeful that things are really changing, and I would say it's more impactful to give a good example than to try to provide advice, and that's what we're doing. And it has not been easy to incorporate Primero H because this is really a joint venture between the third sector and the real estate investors, with put the good guys and the bad guys wherever you want, but things really work. I mean, when you put together, you can be allied to change the world, and you can see, there's benefits for both parts, and doing your work, and creating impact that really changes, people's minds, and that's what we're seeing, and hopefully, as Iker said, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, this was, today, for example, real estate investors are worried about ESG criteria. They didn't know what was that, and now they're trying to figure out, okay, what is E, what is S, and what is G, and we're seeing lots and lots of projects that are really developing, innovation, and it's changing real estate companies.
Anjali, I obviously take your challenge to my oversimplification for the sake of the argument, but what makes you think that we'll reach the change that we need?
So I'm struck by how similar all of our observations are on the need for change and the use of new approaches. I'm struck by that. I'm also very encouraged with the pace of new technology innovation that we see in our work at Avana. So at Avana, our chosen channel for change is technology-led innovation, both on product and process, affecting climate action. The quality of founders that we are seeing that are now devoting their careers, it's not a passion project, but they're devoting their careers to solving some of these seemingly intractable problems, gives me hope. I'm very encouraged that we will actually solve them. The other aspect of the work we do at Avana is system-level rethinking, and which requires us to take into account new technologies, the innovation space, our startup investing, but also linking it back to industry. So you have to bring the market into this. Ultimately, for scale, it has to be market ready and scalable commercially. So that scaling up and market readiness and then working closely with policy. Fortunately, it seems like, at least in India for sure, but globally also, I think there is now an emerging consensus on policy on the need to look at urban as a significant force for both growth and change and climate action. So you have to bring the policymakers in as well.
Very good. Advocacy, market discipline, new forms of partnership, and hope in the pace of new technology and innovation. I guess there's a bit of that in the 4 approaches that you shared. But I hope you appreciate, they all entered from very different angles, but I also think that there is a very healthy convergence. Is there anyone that has an itching question? Does anyone want to be illuminated by our friends? Let's do one thing. I will go and we'll share the love, and I will take the microphone to you. No, let me go. And I will say hi to you, and you make your question, and then the panel takes it, and then we close it. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for the panel. What could you share with us that is a good example of something that it's been innovative, having the scale, and really impacting positive environmentally and so forth? Because we've heard a lot of targets, but not any example.
Thank you, George. And there's a question there, right?
Hi, thank you for the panel. And actually, to answer to your question, and then I do my question. We are a company that is called Bioautonomy, and we integrate nature-based solutions for architecture and construction and design to create autonomous buildings. And my question is, I think our biggest barrier is the regulations, public policy, to make this innovation happen. We integrate technology, ancient knowledge, natural wisdom, but we have this restraining force for the regulations to allow us to show that this works. We've been doing it individually. We need to fight against these regulations for allow us to show this. But I will ask you, and especially for the Valencia project maybe, how are you dealing with the regulations and the policies to make this innovation and this new urban development happen?
2 great questions. Probably we have 2 minutes, and I should behave because I'm part of the hosting organization, so I don't want to be told off by everyone. You look amazing from the stand. Who wants to take it? We have these 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
So he's
But
longer
I'll,
around,
I'll,
yeah.
I'll give a couple of examples of actual scaled impact. So,
Sorry, Tom is here. Tom is coming to kick. I'm afraid of Tom.
Oh,
Tom, we have.
Tom is
I will
the
fight for my
enforcer
2
has
minutes.
arrived.
Tom,
I'll talk
don't
quickly.
you dare.
We invested in a clean cook stove company a few years ago, and 2 years later, 10 million people had cleaner cook stoves, and that company continues to literally sell millions of clean cook stoves, which reduces the incidence of fires in homes as well as improves the air quality in homes. So, that's one example. Another example is we're in the wind down phase of a 10-year fund that has dispersed $200 million for housing improvements and house building globally in 33 countries. But on the back of that, actually over $1 billion worth of lending benefiting over 300,000 families has happened. So we do have examples of
Thank you for
scale.
the 2 examples. There are 100 examples. So maybe that's something that you can pick up after the session with George, and it would be great to create a repository of these examples. And you were alluded directly
Yes,
about
I need
what
to address
good
that.
regulation looks
so
like.
here's the, kind of my starting point is we work within the law, right? But that doesn't mean we have,
Thank
to be,
God.
we have to be happy with it, or that we shouldn't lobby, or at least say, I don't agree with you demanding parking spaces if we're going to share mobility, and by the way, this makes this more expensive, right? So that's unfortunately, and we're very, activists around that, like explicitly and taking a role. But there's also another point that I'd like to kind of build on that, which kind of, if we're thinking about mobilizing capital, is I think everything that looks like a startup today is very investable, right? Everything that looks like an infrastructure project today is very, well, I would say they're clear investment partners. Maybe not everything's investable. But if you're thinking about urban challenges, the things that are like a mix of many different things, asset light, asset heavy, combination, that's not structured. I think that's one of the big challenges of the industry, is that things that don't look like A, B, or C are hard to structure, finance. Sometimes you got to decouple things, cutting pieces, right? And that's as equal as challenge, I think, as regulation.
Look, we started talking about the challenges and how worried we are. At least after these 50 minutes, I come out of this session feeling more hopeful, thinking that this is possible, and for a world with more Rolands, with more Angelis, with more Jaimes, with more Ikers, that multiply this, and people like you in the audience. Enjoy the rest of the summit. We are just a bit to go. Tom, we finished on time. Man, 2 sessions on time. I hope to get some Christmas card or something that you guys in the UK like to send. I would gladly accept a Christmas card or whatever you want to share. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. And please engage with these guys. They are amazing. And yeah.